You're all set now, Tara.
Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Warden.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It is 9 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. Tara, can you confirm that we have quorum?
We do have quorum. We have all members present this morning, with the exception of Councillor Nielsen and Councillor Boddy, who will be joining us momentarily.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any declaration of pecuniary interest related to any item on the agenda today? Okay, not seeing any. If one should arise during the course of the meeting, feel free to declare it at that time. So before we go to the delegations, I'll perhaps ask CAO Wingrove to introduce our guests that will be delegating to us today. So Kim, please.
Good morning, Council. Thank you, Mr. Warden. And it's a real pleasure to have with us this morning our project manager from Collier's Project Leaders, Andrew Rodriguez. For those of you who are newer to Council, the county engaged with Collier's through an RFP process back in 2021. And I can't say enough about what a great relationship we have with Andrew and his team. I hope that you'll feel the same way after you see the presentation this morning. Joining Andrew is the lead on the architects team, and Deborah Wadsworth from Keesian, and there are a number of partners who work with Deborah, and I'm sure that they've got more to say about those specifics. So if that's fine, I'll turn it over now to Andrew to take us through his presentation. Andrew?
Thank you very much, Kim, and good morning, everyone. It's been a while since we've met. At least I've had the chance to meet with the group virtually. So there's a few faces I recognize, a lot of new faces. So it's really nice to have the opportunity to share an update in terms of where we've been from the project and what we have upcoming, as this year is really going to be a big year for the Rockwood Terrace Campus of Care with what we have planned. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Could you give me a thumbs up if you can see, please? Excellent. Okay, so what we have lined up for today is I'm going to start off providing a general update so that all members can orient themselves from a timeline perspective in terms of what was completed and what's outstanding. And we want to keep the bulk of the presentation for Deborah to provide an overview of the site, some of the landscaping features and what components have been planned for each level. The design team, and there's several individuals and professionals that are made up of that team, have done a tremendous amount of work last year and have a lot of work on the plate for this year, but you'll have a chance to see some of the 3D renderings and really get a sense as to how these spaces have been planned. So that will be the bulk of the presentation for today.
Andrew, if I could just interrupt you for a second there, I forgot to ask, how do you want to handle questions? Do you want to wait till the end of your presentation? Do you want to pause at certain points, or do you want somebody just to yell out their...
I think if we could, if we use like the raising hand system, we'll and we keep an eye out, we can ask questions throughout, just because we'll be jumping around from a schedule and design perspective, and so that people don't forget questions. So by all means, we're happy to pause at any point, and we'll also try to proactively make some pauses to see if members have questions.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, so from a schedule perspective, this is a busy slide, but I'm going to walk you through where we started and where we're going. So as Kim mentioned, we started our mandate in mid-2021, where our focus was to go out with the documents and to procure a prime consultant, which is the architecture team and engineers. That was done towards the end of 2021. And 2022 is when we really jumped into the main activities from a master planning and functional programming perspective, looking at the different blocks on the site. So not only long-term care, but also assisted living, independent living in the village square, and how to optimize this on the site based on the objectives and what Grey County was looking to achieve. That led us to a pretty significant milestone almost a year ago to this date in March, where the approval was provided to proceed with not only the long-term care component, but also the assisted living in the village square. So I often say this was the point where this project went from being a long-term care redevelopment project to really a campus of care, which was always part of the long-term vision for this site. So at that point, we then had to catch up from a schematic design perspective from both the Village Square and the assisted living to keep up with the long-term care design. We had a chance to have some pre-consultation sessions with West Gray, some virtual meetings with the Rockwood Terrace team, with residents, with members of the public, with staff. And we also had a package that was submitted, a consolidated package by the design team. So this took us through about halfway through 2022. The latter half of 2022 was focused on design development. So as part of this, there were some 3D renderings that were prepared towards the end of last year, which you'll get to see during Deborah's presentation. We had a draft site plan application to West Gray, and that will be formalized and formally submitted quite shortly this year. But it gave us a chance to submit the documentation and to receive some feedback and comments so that we can go in with our best foot forward with the formal submission this year. We also had our first technical submission to the Ministry of Long-Term Care. So in total, there are 2 technical submissions that need to go in. There's a preliminary plans, which was completed, and the next one that's forthcoming is the working drawing. So we're well on track to receive our preliminary plans approval quite shortly. And then we move on to our next submission, which is the working drawings that we have planned for end of March, early April this year. The end of 2022 was also our major submission to the cost consultant for preparing the Class B cost estimate. So that work is still ongoing right now, and we do expect to have an update at an upcoming task force meeting to be able to look at the numbers and forecasts in more detail. So what we have planned for this year is really a focus on the contract documents, which are buttoning up all the design documents and preparing them to a degree of completeness that would be submitted to proponents that would eventually bid on the project. So that's the main focus of the design team. We're going to be going through permits and approvals. So I mentioned the site plan application approval earlier. We'll be going through a process to obtain a building permit. I mentioned the second technical submission to the ministry. We're also going to be starting with the pre-qualification for general contractors. So that will be done ahead of the tender date to ensure we have a pool of capable contractors with experience of projects of similar size and complexity. So we'll be starting that process and working with Grey County team and staff just to go over some of the legal requirements, insurance requirements for supplementary conditions. That typically takes some time to work through. We have some time now, so we want to make sure we get it right, certainly before going out to the pre-qualification period and tender period. And then engaging with IO for financing. So I've listed Infrastructure Ontario as a typical financer for these types of projects and where we see municipal corporations obtain financing. So that will be part of some ongoing conversations and work that would need to take place to eventually have municipal bylaw in place for sufficient financing before an approval to award is in place for the project. So that takes us to the tender period, which will start this summer in August, and then a construction period that's slightly over 2 years. 2.5 years that will take us to a first resident date in June 2026. So again, a lot of information here, but a lot of key milestones that we do have planned for 2023, looking to award a construction contract and get a shovel in the ground to support the first resident date of 2026. I'll just pause here before we move on to Deborah's component of the presentation to see if there's any questions or comments in relation to the timeframe plan for the project.
Thank you, Andrew. I can't see everybody on my screen, so if you have a question, use the raise hand feature or speak up. Okay, not hearing any, Andrew. Please continue.
Okay, so at this portion, I'm pleased to hand over to Deborah to provide an overview of the fun stuff and seeing where we're at with the design. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. Okay. Here we go. Switch to slideshow mode. All right. So, I'm Debbie Wadsworth from Kasian Architecture.
We're not seeing the presentation. No, at least I'm not.
Okay. It's showing me that I am sharing.
Deborah, would you like me to share on my end and you just signal when to skip slides?
Actually, one second, let me try again.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, okay.
There you
great.
go. Thank you.
It's, how's that?
Perfect.
Good, okay, great. In Zoom, there's an extra button that I missed. Okay, here we go. As has been mentioned, a lot of individuals are involved in this project. On the design side, I'm working with colleagues at KZN as well as Ted Handy Associates in Barrie. We have a researcher on our team, Dr. Armstrong. So this project has been well steeped in research, and a group of individuals with literally decades of experience in healthcare and long-term care. So we're approaching the project both with best practices in infection prevention and control, and as well as a resident-centered experience for long-term care. About a year ago, I went up to the site to see what we were working with, and this is a snapshot of one angle of the site. And over the last 13 months, what we've worked towards is something that looks more like this. And in the next few slides, I'll walk you through an orientation of the site and some of the components inside. So for those attending who were at the last presentation, there will be some nuances to some changes. For the most part, it is the same, which is a very good sign, actually. We kicked the tires hard on this in terms of the research, and also to validate over and over again the direction that Rockwood Terrace wanted to take. So this is the overall site, and starting at the very bottom at the south end, there's an entrance to the village square. And we'll talk about that a bit more in detail, but essentially the village square is going to be a component of this campus that has some services and retail and cafe for the people in this area and the people in this neighborhood. The main entrance to the long-term care home is on the east. Adjacent to it is an entrance to the assisted living, which is up on the top floor of this building. And on the other side, we have a staff entrance. And there's parking. So at the main entrance, I'll just go through the parking areas for you. We have a drop-off and driveway zone with barrier-free parking for assisted living and long-term care. And from the street, this is generally what the scale and the feeling will be. So there's a generous drop-off area with a canopy, a covered care canopy. That is a requirement of the Ministry of Long-Term Care to have a weather-protected entrance and some perimeter landscaping. To the north, we have the bulk of the parking for the campus. So there is a large expanse there. So we're actually in excess of the absolute minimum municipal requirements for parking on the campus. And on the west side, we have a block for staff parking and then village square parking. In terms of barrier-free parking, we have more than double. Actually, the municipal requirement is for 4 parking spots for a development of this size, and we have 9. So as expected, they're mostly gathered at the front entry to the long-term care and assisted living, but we also have a couple dedicated for the village square and staff as well. Also on the west side, we have out of sight of the street, but also close to the street, the service and loading area. And looking from the bird's eye view, this is what the west side of that looks like. So what you're looking at in the center of the image is the staff entrance. Slightly to the right of that is the loading and docks. And on the far right is the village square along the new South Street East. And the piece to the left is the northwest wing of the resident rooms. Now looking at the areas where and how we're developing landscaping, along the perimeter where the resident rooms are and the entrances, We have.
Debbie, sorry to jump in. I just saw someone
Sure.
raise their hand here with a question or comment.
Oh, sure. Hi, Barbara. And Kevin.
Good morning.
Hi.
Through you, Warden Milne. Hello, and it's nice to meet you virtually. Because this is the first introduction for about 50% of us, myself, if the main parking lot is at I'm looking at the screen, the top
Mm-hmm.
right, so I'm going to assume that's north.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yes.
entrance to the drop off is around the corner, and like, could you just pretend I parked in that lot, and how would I get in to visit
Okay.
my loved one?
There is a sidewalk around the entire perimeter of that parking lot. So at no point do you have to walk through cars or onto the street if you're approaching that from a safety perspective. In terms of the resident experience, what we know is that often people assume that looking onto a garden or something would be the preferred viewpoint from a resident bedroom. In fact, that is what some people want, but many people want to see the activity around the front entrance and the coming and going of people. And so we deliberately configured a lot of the resident rooms around the access points and driveways and views to the sidewalk to the street. And so we've tried to disperse the parking with access around the site, views to resident rooms, and also so that there was not one point on the site that was a sea of parking. Like, we didn't want the shopping mall style where you have a whole bunch of parking in the front and then the building is set way back from the street. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Hi, Kevin.
Excuse me. Good morning, Deborah. The warden may be somebody that puts a perspective onto this, but I'm looking at the loading dock area where you are and the staff parking.
Mm-hmm.
And with a 24-hour system, the staff parking lot predominantly is going to be filled. And I'm just looking at the way that comes in there, and being a former truck driver, referring to the warden and another individual, Mr. Hutchison, who does logistics.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking at that, I'm thinking of a 53-foot trailer that's coming in there to do delivery. And if that staff parking lot's full, am I just assuming that the truck driver is going to be slightly miffed at trying to make that as a right curve to go in over the curb there and around, and then trying to get a load back into that dock? Just at first glance, it doesn't look good.
Okay.
That's just me as being an old farmer trying to back up a wagon.
Okay. We didn't guess it. So we do have the turning and the truck movements from the civil engineer. So I'd be happy to, forward that to you if that was necessary or of interest. But we did work that through, and we confirmed numerous times about the size of trucks that would be accessing that. I'm quite confident that it does work based on the work and the analysis that we did for that driveway and the loading area.
If I could just jump in there, Deborah, Mr.
Sure.
Eccles is correct. I that caught my eye as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I suspect most, if not all, of the vehicles going in there will be straight trucks. I doubt whether you'd have a 53-foot trailer going in there. I can't imagine the building eating that much lettuce in a week, but you never know. But yeah, that did caught my eye as well. But I have confidence that you've researched that well, and we'll see how it plays out. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I'll let Kim Wingrove direct us afterwards, but we're happy to show you the information if that's necessary. Any more questions before we move on to other aspects of the landscape? All right.
Debbie, if I'm not sure if this is, I don't want to jump the gun here, but I just want to, while I saw it here, we mentioned earlier that the approved campus of care included the village square, the assisted living and long-term care, but also what this site and landscape plan here shows a future area for the independent living building, as well as the parking. So while this slide is up, I think it's important for all the members to understand that this was planned vis-a-vis a future phase, and that's where that is planned for as part of the master site plan.
Thank you. Yes, on the bottom left, you see the words future building. And so this is the area that's earmarked for independent living. And there's just to the north of that, above that, there are words that say future parking. And well, existing forest to remain is in the interim, but future parking, the parking area is configured so that it becomes seamless in a way with the future. So the curbs would be taken out and the parking area extended. So what you're seeing in the blue here now are the courtyards for the residents, and these are secured courtyards. So they're do have gates on the outer perimeter, but they are intended to be accessed from inside of the building on the ground floor. And we also have specific designated areas that are community amenities. So on the bottom right, there's a community plaza. The village square, as I mentioned, has a cafe inside. So the idea here is to have some seating outside, perhaps a small playscape. Something we heard from both Dr. Armstrong, our researcher, and in the our conversation with residents and our own research is that often in long-term care homes, people want their family and especially grandchildren to visit, but there isn't anything for them to do. And so we are very intentional about creating a place that is for all ages. And so there's a plan to have some sort of a playscape, not, what we used to call monkey bars and that, but something that could be played on, but when children are not around, it becomes a nice feature of the landscape. So that is the idea there, to have an all ages attractive place where families, and particularly young ones, would like to come and visit. On the top left, where it says seating and walking trail, there is a walking trail that cuts through this site already, and we're planning to change it so that it's more accessible for people with walkers and wheelchairs or mobility challenges, and also have a seating space just outside of the secure area. That's not a formal garden, but an area where people can stop and take a rest or sit and chat, and potentially visitors to the long-term care home would take their loved ones out there and have an alternate experience, so to speak. So now moving inside the building. So to the south, we have the village square. The idea here is to have a combination of retail and personal services spaces and a cafe. So the cafe is to the east, and then we have a central corridor with mostly the vendors facing the street, and a central entryway and a central seating area. This village square is connected to the long-term care home from the inside, both from the front of house, so that residents and visitors can come down for lunch or something like that, and on the back of house area, so that materials coming in from loading and also the waste collection bays share that service. So we were quite also intentional about creating efficiency of services, like building support services and program services within the building. The gray areas at the west end of the village square are some of the building services. So there's an electrical room, the maintenance shop where the snow clearing equipment and light machinery would be stored, and the IT workroom. Any questions about the village square? All right, moving north is the long-term care core. So the core is basically the engine of the home. On the left, facing the staff entrance or staff zone, is that what we call the back of house. So the prep kitchen, the receiving area, the waste holding, there's some storage there, facility storage, also staff facilities, so change rooms and the staff lounge, and bulk storage, so PPE and medical supplies. On the right, facing the main driveway, excuse me, are the primary front of house spaces like the multi-purpose room and the lounge. And this gives you a sense of what the look and feel is going to be. So on the left, you're seeing the lounge. The glass wall at the back is facing actually the entry space. So remember, I mentioned that residents like to see the comings and goings. And so we've created this so that people sitting either in the bistro or the lounge can see the entrance and watch people and the activity at the front. On the right-hand side at the top, we have the reception area. So the reception desk is both accessible on the left and also screened from view on the right, because it is a workspace. And so there are, circumstances or parts of the day where you don't want everybody coming up to the desk to see what is on your computer screen in terms of confidentiality and heads down workspace. The multi-purpose room is the middle shot. It's designed as 2 rooms with a flex space, so the wall is retractable for larger events. And because of the configuration and the location of this room, it can be used for broader events outside of the home. So special events where the broader visitors are invited to attend. And it spills out into the bistro area. So on the plan, all of these rooms are connected within the same sort of rectangular space. So it's meant to be a dynamic, multi-purpose, flexible zone. Any questions about the front of house area? All right. So moving on, now we have the RHA, which stands for resident home area. And this is where the resident rooms are. So we have a combination of basic and private rooms. This is also where the dining room is, care desks and support rooms like soiled utility, clean linen supply, the tub room and the shower room, activity rooms. There's a therapy room also for visiting podiatrists or other allied care providers. And the gray boxes are we've got peppered through building support rooms, so IT rooms and electrical rooms. We also have at the north end in the yellow, we have sunrooms and outdoor terraces that look onto the courtyard, so that there's a sunny open spot that is not in the front of house. Sometimes people just want to go to their living room, so to speak, without being in the full public area. So we have lounges and a sunroom. Again, they're not frills, so to speak. They're required by the Ministry of Long-Term Care, and they reflect that they respect the need for residents to have a choice in where they spend their congregate time. At the second floor, the resident home area is identical to the first. So, and I forgot to mention, we have 32 residents on each floor. And on the roof over the over the long-term care core, the back of house area, we have a garden space that's planned. And the huge benefit of this, as we all saw in COVID, was that when one side or another in a resident home area is on outbreak and it has to be closed off, those residents often don't get to go outside. One, because there's staff is beyond capacity to take people outside. And sometimes on an upper floor, the only access would be to go downstairs and go to the front door. So we have, for residents particularly, where that would be a huge challenge without staff assistance, or if they're not allowed to leave their floor without staff assistance, we have provided a roof garden. So no matter what side of the building or what level has an outbreak active, every resident would have access to outdoor space. And this is obviously highly regarded as a benefit to mental and emotional health. So this this garden features a few things. It will have obviously a very small little maintenance shed for the immediate needs for taking care of this level. It'll have a water for watering the plants. It'll have a herb garden or a small garden for the residents to be active gardeners. Let me see, and the plants and shrubs that are grown actually throughout the site are the type that would be attractive to birds and pollinators.
Debbie, there's one question or comment.
Thank you. Hi, Barbara.
Thank you. Through you, Warden Milne. I have two questions with regard to the rooftop open space. By the way, I agree. I've experienced a loved one in long-term care, and having those open spaces is great. Is there a plan for a pergola or some kind of shade shelter so they can be out in not so great weather if they
Yes.
choose? Or okay.
There's,
And
well,
my other,
Mhm.
Go ahead.
I was going to say there's a shade structure in the current design. The main canopy at the front entrance spans across like the structure, so it's meant to be continuous. Now, whether that's with a sight line or whether it's actual remains to be seen. We're still detailing that piece, but there is a shade structure there for sure.
Thank you. My other question, I guess, if we had a virtual lens on one of those virtual reality type walkthroughs, if I was a resident and I'm pointing at your screen, by the way, you're not going to see that, and I was in the main area on the floor. How do you get to the village square? Would they go to the village square for those services and they have to go through all of that back end? And can you just kind of walk me
Sure.
through? I'm going for a hair appointment.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
And alternatively, if I was someone coming in from the street through the village square, and I was then I just see that this is navigating a whole bunch, but maybe they're on different levels. Thank you.
Sure. The village square is only on level 1. So in the middle of this screen, let me see, in the middle of this screen, in the middle of the floor plan, there's a large yellow rectangle. That's the dining room. And across the hall from that to the south, in white, there's a rectangle there a little bit to the right of the big yellow rectangle. Those are elevators. So that central corridor and the elevator bank is not assigned to an RHA because anybody needs to be able to use that corridor. So if you were on the second floor and you wanted to go to the village square, you would get in the elevator, you would go down to the main floor. And then at the main floor, you come down the corridor that's on the far right here, and you pass by the lounge and the bistro. You pass through there's a large corridor that goes through those. On the far right, you see a wide corridor. It's a white strip going south. That's the main corridor, and that has a little bit of an S bend. And there are double doors at the bottom in the green zone, 2 sets of double doors. Those go into the village square. So appreciating that not every resident would be able to or capable of going independently into the village square, there is a security point there. If you were visiting someone and you wanted to come into the village square with them, you would have some means of getting into the village square. So that might be an access code, that might be a card reader where staff would let you through. So every resident in the home that wants to go into the village square would take the same path. And there are a few things built into this. Not only are there locked doors at the village square to make sure that anyone who should not be leaving the home can. It goes by a staff area, so it goes through the main common area. It passes a reception area. It passes the staff zone. So there are eyes and ears, so that it's well visible to people going through there. Now, if you're coming from the village square, the same thing happens. There's a secure point because we can't have the public coming in without checking in with reception first. And so we will have a card reader there as well as a buzzer, so that it's connected to the reception so they can see who is there. So someone can come down and meet you, or there will be a release to let people into the home from the village square. If, let's say, someone is returning from lunch, for example, a visitor with a resident.
Thank you. Follow up. And so you've explained that the winding corridors, there's multiple checkpoints. It's intentional. It's not for convenience. There's an actual reason for it, and it's generally to protect the residents from wandering or people wandering in as well. Thank you so much.
There's more nuance to. I mean, there are many decisions right in this, and so what you just said reminded me of something else. The other idea around the village square is to have a different place to go, right? Because generally residents in long-term care home, they have a very small world, right? So they're usually quite constricted to the building and the site around them. And so the idea in placing the village square here is to have a readily visible, accessible place for the broader community. It's also not intended to be like the shop for the village square, like they're like the bistro or something, because they have that inside the home. The distance is to create a break, like a physical and a mental break from where they live to go downtown, let's say. Do you know what I mean? So the effort and the distance creates that psychological different place. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. Thank you so much, Deborah.
You're welcome. Scott, you have a question? You're muted. Still can't hear you. There we go.
Yes, good morning, Susan. Sorry, I had to hit my unmute button. Through the warden, good morning, County Council. You mentioned the basic versus private rooms. Can you just give a quick overview of the difference between the two sets of rooms and what the percentage of private versus basic would be in this new plan, please?
Sure. I used to know the numbers exactly between basic and private. I'd have to look it up. I'd have to look that up. However, the complement of basic and private, these are ministry defined sizes and terms. So in a basic room, basically, two residents share a washroom. That's the main difference. And we have, we went to great lengths to create a basic room that broke from the conventional layout. So often in long-term care homes, when you walk into a basic resident room, you walk in a door, there's a washroom immediately on the left, and then there's a resident immediately on the left, and there's a curtain, and there's another resident beyond the first resident. And the problem with that is that the resident on the far end gets the window, and the resident close to the bathroom is close to the bathroom. And you have to walk through one resident's private space as a visitor to get to the visitor or to get to the resident beyond. And that goes for care staff and visitors and anybody else coming into that room. So we created a configuration of a basic room where you enter, each resident in the basic room has a separate door. You come into a small vestibule without a door off the corridor, and to the left you go into the one residence room, and to the right you go into the other residence room, and both of those residents have a door that they can close so that they have a lot more privacy. They can, there's no debating if someone wants the door open or closed. You have your own choice. And then the washroom that's shared is at the far end, and it has an access point from each side. So again, just like every resident has a door they can close to their room, every resident has their own door into the washroom. So it's more of a U-shaped space, if you a horseshoe, upside down U. It's more of that configuration. So the benefit of that is one, acoustic privacy, but also infection control. So if someone is sick, you're not sitting or laying down right beside them for hours at a time. So we've created a physical barrier and a physical distance between residents who are sharing accommodation. In the private room, there's no other resident involved at all. It's one person, one room, one washroom. That's the main difference.
Thanks very much, Deborah, for that overview. Can you also please just, for the benefit of our new members of council, just speak to the consultation that's been involved between your group and the senior management staff at Grey County, long-term care staff, in developing this project?
Oh, sure. We've been meeting, on what I would call general user group meetings every 2 weeks since 2 Novembers ago. We have, within those user group meetings, looked at planning. So first of all, we started with the programming. So, ministry prescribed areas or CSA prescribed areas for rooms and ministry required spaces like lounges and dining rooms and things like that. And we worked with the Rockwood Terrace team to create the configuration that would reflect what their staff needs and their resident needs. And we had we had a few broader user group meetings where we invited residents and visitors and broader staff that were not necessarily in the user group meetings to give us their feedback also. So there's been a lot of consultation, even through the design development, and now we're into the construction documents phase. We have continued meeting every other week, and we have what we call topic meetings. So in the broader scheme of things, we move from talking about the program to talking about the configuration of floors. Then we talked about the configuration of specific rooms on those floors. Then we talked about, and this is just the building, the site plan was a whole other series of meetings also. Actually, I'll get to that. So then we, from the floors to the rooms, now we're talking about different systems. So we've had a meeting about we've had 2 meetings about door hardware. We've had meetings about finishes. We will have meetings about lighting on Tuesday. And we have other meetings coming up about other very specific systems that, that affect the specifications and the detailed drawings. For the site plan, excuse me, we had a series of meetings at the very beginning at the master plan level. 1 second. Thank you. We had workshops where we looked at different, again, in block pieces, and we did a process that's called Choose by Advantage. So we engaged Kim and Randy, who are on this call, as well as the Rockwood Terrace team, to workshop the entire master plan. So the configuration of the site with all of the elements, including the parking, the gardens, driveways, and the building pieces. And we looked at 11 of those. And then in the Choose by Advantage, once you move these pieces around, you get a visceral sense for the scale of the development and the scale of the site. Once you've got a good sense of that, and like, where should the village square be, as an example? How close should it be to the residents? What street should it be on? How will people be arriving? All of those things were taken into account. In Choose by Advantage, you then start to say, okay, so having experienced what all of these pieces, the potential for the site, what's important to you? What are the main objectives? And we looked at the color it objectives for the county as a layer, as an overview, as well as the specific site things. So this is what our residents want. This is what our visitors say they would like to see. This is what's important to our staff. And we essentially ranked all of those 11 options against that criteria. And that's how we came up with the site plan that you see. So there's been a ton of engagement with Kim and Randy and Karen and Jennifer and Brandon and Lucinda and Terry and others at Rockwood Terrace.
Deborah, if I could just add to that, I think an important point to add is also, as Deborah mentioned, that this started off with getting an overview of leveraging Dr. Pat Armstrong's work and what are some best practices and trends that are being done in long-term care. And our work plan is very much intentionally set up so that at key milestones or stage gates, we have an opportunity to receive a complete package. We get it costed by a cost consultant and then have a wholesome discussion with the extended team at Grey County to ensure that the scope, features, and functionality best align with the goals and priorities for the organization and the operation. So that's very much been a part of this process. We will be going through this process as we receive the updated Class B cost estimate, which is forthcoming, and then finally the pre-tender Class A cost estimate. So it's very much an ongoing process, and our goal is really to align the scope, quality, features as much as possible with the goals and objectives from Grey County and constraints.
So thanks, Andrew and Deborah, for those responses. I just thought it was important that our members of council know how embedded our staff have been in this process. Thanks.
Absolutely. And sorry for the long-winded response. I mean, I love this stuff, so I could literally talk about it all day long. At level 3, we have assisted living. So we have 40 assisted living units up here, and they are pretty much split 50-50 between studio rooms, which is like a bachelor apartment, and 1-bedroom apartments. And these will have a small kitchenette that can be closed off if essential. Actually, we're working with the details of that. So if there's a resident in assisted living who would have problems with or potentially dangerous situation with cooking material for cooking equipment, for example, we're looking at ways to either power that down or to conceal it altogether. So again, we're trying to walk the fine line between giving people as much choice as possible in their day-to-day living, and also have the parameters in place for safety. These support rooms, like so shared dining and the tub rooms and building services are, of course, identical to the floors below. So we can run everything vertically, and it's pretty straightforward from a construction point of view. And this is a snapshot of what those rooms are emerging into in terms of interior configurations and space. So on the left is, general dining area, but on the right, each of the dining rooms has a family nourishment room. And the whole idea is, again, to create a space where there's a normal kitchen. So if a resident family member is here and they want to make something, a special dish, or have a birthday party, or make some tea or something like that, there's a place here where a resident or a family member can come and do that. And the fridge is for residents to use for snacks and cold drinks and things like that. So it's in the support kitchen and the resident servery that's operated by staff is not accessible to residents. But it's really important. We heard over and over again that this sense of this aspect of home is available for residents at any time that they want. And that And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Very good presentation. Any
Thank you.
questions from council regarding that? Or Andrew, did you have any more?
No, I think this was, thank you for the overview, Deborah. We'll open it up to any questions now, whether it's schedule related or design related.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Gregg, you have a question.
Thanks, Warden Milne. Just a couple easy questions here. The first is to Deborah and or Andrew. We used to have a councillor in Owenstown that was a really big proponent of scooter accommodation. And I'm just wondering, is that something that gets contemplated in the development of these buildings, or that you foresee being something to consider? And if so, has it been considered? And secondly, just a question again, noting that 25% of fires are generally kitchen. If you could just expand on those comments once again about the ability to cook for residents in the third floor. And I guess I would just echo, I would benefit or like to see just the specs. I think Brian and Kevin raised good points about the loading docks. And I would just like to see those distributed in the future for us to take a look at. Thanks.
Sure. I can speak to the, let me see here. In terms of, are you still seeing my screen here?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So this is the LTC core. We have outside where my cursor is circling, we will have a couple of outdoor parking and charging stations for scooters. And we also have indoor in here beside the hair salon. We will have indoor parking for scooters. So there is accommodation for scooters in that way, both outdoors and indoors. The building is fully accessible as well. So and elevators are all sized for like they're hospital oriented, so stretcher sized, if you will. Does that answer your question about the scooters?
Go ahead, Scott.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Hello, Terry.
Terry.
Good morning.
Yep.
Good morning.
Go ahead, Terry.
To you, Warden Millen. Some of these residents are going to own their own vehicles, and it seems like the future is going towards electric vehicles. Is there going to be charging stations in the parking areas for some of these residents, or even visitors, I guess?
We have we've anticipated that, and so there will be rough-ins for those. For the conduit will be provided for that.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome.
Any other questions from council? Oh, Kim, go ahead.
So Warden Milne, I just wondered, Deborah, do you want to just speak to like the kitchen cooking, fire suppression?
Oh, yes, yes.
Do you just want to speak to that? Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Let's see here. We oh, it's not okay. It's not detailed enough on this plan to really do that. But we have basically a very in the assisted living. There is still, so this is that floor. See the big yellow rectangle is shared dining, and there's kitchen support and a prep kitchen downstairs. So all residents on this floor have access to this dining, just like there would be on the long-term care homes. Because this is assisted living, and people are able to live more independently, each of these rooms will have a very modest eating area, like a cooking area. So that might look like a 2-burner induction cooktop. a small refrigerator and a counter with a couple of duplex receptacles for kettles or that. The idea we talked about, we have talked about toasters and things like that, and microwaves. And toasters and microwaves in particular, the popcorn, we've had this long discussion, create the most false alarms, and also create a lot of smoke when they're left in for too long. So there is a deliberate decision process where residents will go to the dining area and use one of those family support or family nourishment areas to use some of those things. So the microwave, for example. So in the assisted living resident area, it's a very, very modest cooking area. It's not going to be fit up with all of the appliances or accoutrements of a typical kitchen. And so we are going through that process now as we're detailing what are the elements that residents can have in their rooms and what would create a lot of false alarms or a lot of smoke or that. So, and we're putting those in the family nourishment room, so that we're still, we've done quite a bit of work in assessing that, but as we get into the construction documents and we're detailing things, some of those conversations are still ongoing. Does that answer your question?
It does. That's good. Because it does kind of expand on what kind of cost magnification might have been happening just to provide that ability in room for residents. So no, that's good. Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you, Deborah, for that. And I think we're getting a sense of the amount of detail that the various meetings have dealt with over the last 2 years with Deborah and others on the design team. I see a couple others with hands up. I'll go with Councillor Patterson first. Sue?
Thank you, Warden Millen, and good morning, County Council. Thanks, Deborah and Andrew. Can you share about snow removal? Is there a designated area, how it's going to work?
Do you get snow?
They don't get snow in West Grey. It's all, the sun always shines.
That's what I heard.
You've been talking to the wrong people.
Let me see here. We have a drawing called SSA, which stands for Snow Storage Areas. And it's not on here, but we have a drawing for it. So essentially, I'm still showing my screen. Yeah, so we have snow storage areas along the perimeter of this lot, and we've also looked at that in terms of the windrows diagram. So we've got we'll have snow storage areas along the perimeter and down here, and then we will have along the community plaza area here, and then in the north, we'll have snow storage areas along. Well, if I'm remembering this correctly, we cannot block the sidewalks. So in the boulevards here, and then there's a steep incline here. So there's not much use of pushing the snow up against there, but in the green spaces along here. So that's what we've been contemplating. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I think you've got it covered. Thank you.
Okay. Good.
Thank you, Deborah, for that. I see Councillor Kentner next, please.
Thank you, and through you, Warden Milne. Good morning, everyone. And Deborah, thank you very much for this. You probably don't have what I'm looking for, but I was curious. You do have wonderful concept photos of the common areas. Could you illustrate a typical, residence room, and in particular those for assisted living, just to give us some kind of an idea of how appealing this might be?
They are in progress. Our 3D images for the resident areas are still in progress. Let me see. I was thinking, I can't, there's nothing that I can share with you here right now. We have some precedent ones that we could perhaps share in like a follow-up email or something like that.
That would be awesome.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ross. I saw Kim briefly there with her hand up. Kim, did you have something to add?
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say that we wanted to get information in front of council as early as possible, but as has already been mentioned in this meeting, it's been a tremendous amount of work to get to this point. And you know, the refinements, the discussions that we've had back and forth with the province to ensure that they were entirely satisfied with everything has meant that there's been many iterations of this work. So absolutely, we'll make sure that there's all of the 3D imaging, et cetera, for the rooms. As soon as that's available, we'll make sure that it gets in front of council, but we're just not quite there yet.
Thank you, Kim. Ross, your hand is still up. Are you okay? Or
Sorry, I just maybe a supplementary.
Sure.
Can you tell us in the design for the shared rooms, does each resident get sort of equal, exposure to the window?
Yes. So in what's called the basic room, and the basic is basically defined by the area. It's a ministry definition. Each resident has their own window, and every resident window is also operable, meaning that it opens.
Certainly kind of a real breakthrough, because I think, well, yeah, everybody knows what I'm talking about. And thank you very much.
thank you, Ross.
Thank you.
Councillor Keaveney, you're next.
Thank you, Warden Milne. Good morning, everybody. Deborah, I wonder if I could ask you about the proposed swim facility. Is that a family-oriented area? Would it be used for therapy for the residents? What could you share with us about that?
Okay, thank you. No, it's not. It is the depth. It's about a meter or so deep, and it actually has a fence around it. So it is a secured area, and there will be a pathway, like a maintenance vehicle pathway, and a gate to access that. So it's not considered a space that would be used for therapy or public access.
Kim, you have your hand up. You have something to add there?
Yes, maybe, and it might be useful for Randy to jump in here, but this site has some both lovely and interesting features. And one of the significant pieces of work that's has had to happen here is to ensure that we have appropriate stormwater management on the site, that we're managing the stormwater on this site, Randy, do you want to add anything more about this and the fact that there's stormwater elsewhere also?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that, Kim. And through obviously the Casey design team and EXP is their engineering consultant working on the stormwater management, obviously with increasing permeable surfaces on the property, there's a need to manage the stormwater. So the pond you see on this particular plan is what we call the west pond. There is also another east pond. So that's east of the Rock Street extension that's also being proposed to not only handle the stormwater for this particular proposed development, but we also see that because those are also lands that are owned by the county east of the Rock Street extension, about another 20 acres or so. There's future development potential on that eastern portion. And so the stormwater will be designed not only to be able to handle that this proposed development, but any future development east of Rock Street as well.
Shirley, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much, Warden Milne. I apologize for my eyes. I thought it said swim, but I see I was getting my eyes checked this morning. Thank you.
Well, I knew what you were talking about because a lot of people pronounce that acronym SWIM. I don't see any other questions right away, but I'm wondering, Jennifer, did you have anything you wanted to add or?
No, I don't have anything specific to add. I think the team has covered it really well. It's been a real, except now that you've given me the chance, I will. It's been a really wonderful, interesting, exciting experience. Lots of nuance. I think there have been lots of great questions. So the design team comes with specific questions about how we operate. We ask the staff, what do you do when you go into a room and you're bringing linen? Where do you come from? Then where do you go? What do you do with the linen? And so just very detailed questions so that we're not only building and designing something that meets all of the needs of the residents, but also supports smart and great flow of work and a great work environment. And so it's been really exciting. I'm really proud of where we're at right now, and very grateful for both Andrew and Deborah and their team's expertise, and for the expertise that Karen and her team bring to the discussions. It's been a great experience.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. And I think Deborah mentioned that they had 2 meetings about door hardware, and I'm thinking, wow.
So far.
So far, yeah. I mean, how much can you talk about doorknobs? I'm not sure, but
wow.
In any case, it just again gives you an indication the level of detail that's going into these discussions for sure. Councillor Gregg, I see your hand up, and then I'll go to Councillor McQueen.
Thanks, Warden. Just a quick note, we haven't touched on climate change impacts yet, and being the orientation of the buildings generally is west-east, what considerations were perhaps thrown out there from a climate change impact, i.e. solar panels on the roof type of idea or topic?
Deborah?
Great question. We are actually designing this as for net zero and net zero ready. And so in terms of the building systems, we're using air source heat pumps and mechanical system. And in terms of the architecture, the important thing for net zero is the quality of the building envelope vis-a-vis air infiltration and thermal bridging. And so we're doing a lot of work. I mean, the door hardware detail pales in comparison when you're talking about looking at different frame types for windows. So we're looking at fiberglass versus aluminum, the impacts of that on conduction and condensation on the glass. We're talking about how to monitor the construction of the building, because once those air barriers and vapor barriers are in place, there's no undoing them to do them again. So we want to make sure that it's done properly in the first place. So we're talking with our consultants and specialists and the cost consultant too. And what's a reasonable way to approach this so that we get a really good quality envelope, because that is the lasting element of the building and the most critical in terms of achieving net zero. So we are there's been a lot of detail. The net zero versus net zero ready also affects the use of solar panels. And so we are anticipating that if not now, at some point in the future, there would be solar panels. So we have this, this outward future point of view. So to create a net zero building, 90% of the roof area needs to be solar panels, plus an additional 8,000 square feet of solar panels on the site. And so we're contemplating whether those take the form of shelters for the cars. So there's not, you can't have solar panels in the stormwater facility, and you don't want to put them where your independent living building is going to be, because who knows when you'll have to shift all of those, and then where would you put them? So there's an idea to have covered parking, which is essentially solar panels. That's
Debbie, if I could just jump in here and add it, as part of the work plan with the design team, we had clearly identified in the onset, in line with the climate and sustainability goals for Grey County, to have some analysis done on being net zero ready or net ready, and what that means from an operating perspective as well as a capital perspective. So we are still working through those details right now, and expect to be in a position to either bring that forward to a task force or council, and to see which one we land on. Is it net zero ready or net zero? I think an important point that Debbie made is from a building envelope perspective and a mechanical system perspective, you will have a strong base case that's highly efficient. And the decision on implementing solar PVs would really come down to, are we going to aim to be net zero right off the bat, or will it be net zero ready? However, if it's net zero ready, there would be planning considerations to enable a future conversion to net zero.
Thank you, Andrew and Deborah. Randy, did you want to jump in on that particular topic?
Sure. Yeah. If I can, just to add a little bit more in terms of this. And I think Andrew and Deborah have done a fantastic job of all the work that's gone into just even looking at this aspect of the overall proposed development. And I know our manager of climate change initiatives, Linda Swanson, has been involved with this as well, and working with the Pradis group, which is the sub-consultant that's working on the net zero feasibility assessment. So as Andrew indicated, we're still working on some of those details, and then applying some costings to this in order to have some further discussions with the task force. But yeah, the hope is that at minimum, for sure, net zero ready, with the hope of being able to get to net zero in order to align with the targets that have been set by County Council to be to look at any new buildings to be net zero or net zero ready. So as part of the two, that we're also looking for grant funding opportunities, and working with Pradis and making sure that whatever grant funding opportunities aligns with the possible options that we'll be exploring further with the task force.
Excellent. Thank you, Randy.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor McQueen. Oh, somebody else chime in there? No. Okay, I'll go to Councillor McQueen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Warden, and great information and great questions. Thanks for all the work that everybody's done. My question is more or less an overview of what we've gone through with COVID and all the issues that we have dealt with our homes and the province, and probably new regulations and stuff. And I think it was touched on a little bit about able to isolate infection control in the rooms. Do you feel confident that we are sort of in a good moving forward in a good spot, in the sense of, if something like this flares up again, we're at the best we can get to, in the sense of controlling a pandemic like we just went through within our homes?
Yep. Deborah?
That's directed to me? Yes.
Or Andrew, whoever wants to jump in there.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. And I would like to perhaps also get some feedback from Jennifer on this topic. But I can say for sure, if we look at the bare minimum ministry standard, which is the 2015 long-term care design manual, the home and the space exceeds it. And there were some aimed areas to exceed it, such as infection prevention and control. And I think looking at the rooms, that's probably one of the biggest benefits over there, at a basic room where you each have your own entrance and you have the ability to have a physical barrier instead of using a curtain, which we see some basic rooms still being designed and constructed at the moment that would meet the standard. There's the mechanical systems enabling a higher proportion of outdoor fresh air, to separate some of the mixing of air that could have occurred with older systems, and also creating within the resident home areas staff amenities and spaces where, in the event of an outbreak, you could access these within a resident home area and not lose the ability to have access to some of these shared spaces and be completely cut off in the event of an outbreak. There's some features, like if we look at laundry, for example, there's a new system that's being proposed, a barrier laundry, which minimizes the risk of having soiled and clean mixing. So these are just a few features that I would say are some of the key ones that go over and beyond the manual and were targeted specifically for infection and prevention control purposes, and would be aligned with best practices. So I feel that this wouldn't be just aiming for the bottom of the standard and leaving it open to some risk. The standard in itself is still over and beyond what you would see homes that were built to standards from the 70s. But what you're seeing in the design is includes some best practices and trends that targets those specific areas.
Thank you, Andrew. Is that good, Paul?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I guess where I sort of got that thought was when Jennifer was speaking. And I know one of the big things that we sort of heard through that was the ability for other family members to spend time with, you know, an individual or whatever. And do you have isolation rooms or areas that could, you know, allow that? Because that seemed to be the big criticism across the province, where a loved one is alone and there's an outbreak and they can't have access from a family member. And I don't know if that's something that, is there a special room or an isolated room or a net what do you call it, net pressure room or something? I don't know if that's been thought and if that's available or not. But that was one of the things I remember across a lot of families had talked about, that ability or the lack of the ability to be able to spend time with a loved one if they were passing or had a limited time.
Jennifer, I see your hands up.
Thanks, Warden Milne and Councillor McQueen. It's a good point. And just to further what Andrew was saying, the timing of the planning of the design was quite good in terms of COVID. There was a lot going on, but the homes were actively involved in managing outbreaks and bringing then that experience to the discussions about how could we do this in a different way to eliminate some of these challenges that they have been facing at Rockwood. Again, the way the rooms are designed for even the basic accommodation, each person has their own room and the shared bathroom is in between. So that completely removes the need for having to have special isolation spaces, because we can then do that isolation in their own room. There's things that we can do to support, different ways to have people not using the same bathroom. There's different opportunities there. And I think that also then helps support families are able to come in. We have great policies and processes to support individuals in coming in, even during outbreaks. So that room design is really key in supporting that.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Councillor Mackey, I see your hand up, but I know I also see that Deborah had put up, I think it was Deborah, put up floor plans there for the various types of rooms. Did you want to speak to that before we move on, or?
I found the image of it while Jennifer was talking about it. And so it was just sometimes a picture tells 1,000 words.
Exactly. So I think now would be a good time to, expand on that if you wish to.
Oh, sure. Just briefly.
Because it would answer some of the questions that we've already had here, people looking for specific room configurations and so on.
Sure. So previously I talked about the U shape, the horseshoe. So Jennifer was mentioning each resident has their own room. So both for in terms of when your roommate is feeling ill, you can still have visitors or keep to yourself, basically. So we have a full separation here, and the idea is that when one is sick and the other is not, that the washroom would be used by one and a commode would be used by the other, so that even the shared washroom can be managed that way. And and then there was a earlier question about windows, and that illustrates here how each resident has their own window and fresh air.
Excellent. Thank you, Deborah.
You're welcome.
Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. And through you to Randy, I was just interested, Randy, you mentioned about the possibility for further development on the site. To achieve a full campus of care up the road, we'd need to have, condo units, life leases, six plexes, four plexes, that sort of thing. Can you just provide us with a little more information on the potential for future growth on our site?
Randy?
Yeah, for sure. So outside of, Deborah mentioned this earlier, there was a potential future phase which shows kind of that independent living. So that's one potential future phase or future development to add to the overall campus of care that is being proposed as part of this overall development. As I mentioned, east of what I call the Rock Street extension. So if you can picture where the existing Rockwood Terrace is, of course, this proposed development is right directly south of that. But if you extend the Rock Street, which is to the east of the existing Rockwood Terrace, extend it straight down, east of that road extension, we have another about 20 acres that the county acquired back in 2020. We don't have any plans necessarily at this stage in terms of what could be on that property, and that's something I think that we'll be exploring further with council in terms of what are the opportunities for that piece. But essentially anything in and around, again, further residential, some commercial opportunities, anything that's associated, I guess, with the overall campus of care could be considered in terms of what could go on that property in the east portion of the site. So yeah, nothing set in stone or nothing even proposed at this stage, but noting that we have 20 acres that will be has future potential development. But as I mentioned, that stormwater management pond, it's initially being sized and designed to support what's being proposed as part of this first phase, but it has the ability to be expanded in order to support any future development east of Rock Street.
Thank you, Randy.
Thanks, Randy. Exactly what I wanted to hear.
Good. Thank you, Scott. Councillor DeBreen.
Thank you, Warden Milne. To Deborah, you showed the picture, and forgive me, the schematic of a semi-private versus a basic. Basic is what is the standard for semi-private accommodation, but we're actually not incorporating that standard. We're giving them the U shape on the left that you showed.
That's correct.
Right. Thank you.
Good. Any other questions? Deborah, Andrew, Jennifer, Kim, any last words before we move on? No.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Well, just let me, I don't think there was, get the agenda back up here. There we are. We don't have any correspondence, any other business to come before this meeting. I don't see any, don't think there was any. Our next meeting date for the Long-Term Care Redevelopment Planning Task Force is scheduled for February 21st at 10 a.m. I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Eccles, Councillor Mackey. All those in favor? Or, yeah, good. So thank you very much, Deborah and Andrew. It's been very educational, and we very much appreciate all the work that you're doing, have done, and will continue to do. And Jennifer and her team, yeah, it's been amazing, the amount of work. So thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye.